We are about to end the third class of this three-class series on rebirth, reincarnation, and the illusion of death. As far as charts go, my eyes are always bigger than my stomach, as they say, so I had ideas of coursing you on towards charts that had to do more with the dynamics of rebirth and what happens to the soul actually between birth and death. Between death and birth, probably better said. The bardo that happens after you pass from the body, and what is there in that space of time, and then how a soul works its way back into the body, or with the moonlit path, as Krishna says, or transcends that with the sunlit path and goes beyond rebirth. Those are all beautiful teachings in our tradition too. You don't find those kinds of teachings so complete and so well rendered and so long lived in any other religion of the world. So in a sense, that's what gives India its uniqueness. In another sense, it's what causes it to be criticized as a religion. Anything that's wide open and Catholic and all-inclusive tends to get the go-by, as Vivekananda says, by the intelligentsia, especially if they're focused in just on intellect and not intelligence but intellect. And societies which become affluent and therefore begin to become complacent, rolling in their wealth and in luxury, waves of luxury. Vivekananda said this nation is rolling in waves of luxury. I mean, you haven't learned the lesson that India learned a long time ago, that all of this is unreal and prone to suffering, which was the Buddha's message with his Four Noble Truths. So those kinds of things get the go-by. I mean, the people won't consider them in this mad rush for what that we call materialism. Some of it going on right up here in the volcano that we were talking about at the break. The astronomers versus the Hawaiian people, how to use that sacred land up there, or how not to use it, as the case may be. So this is always the rock and a hard place we find ourselves in, which is why lucky you live Vedanta. There's a saying here in Hawaii, you know, Maui no ka'oi, they say in Maui. You say, oh, Maui's the best oi, and it's the best. But Vedanta no ka'oi, as far as religions, if you want to call it a religion, or if you could even call it a religion, it's more of a non-dual philosophy that's very unique in the fold of religions in the world. Again, talking to a Mexican teenager that I mentioned in the first half yesterday in an email, and saying how all religions are in the house of the Lord, sort of like a big barn that houses lots of cows in their own stalls, Sri Ramakrishna said. So this idea of universality also gets to go by. What's wrong that we can't open our minds up and learn from other religions? How much richer we'd all be if we knew if Christianity knew some of the dynamics of rebirth and reincarnation, and if Judaism knew more about the Sufi saints and seers and what they can add into the store of wisdom. If all these religions could share, would be, as Gandhi said, not just tolerate, because he wasn't into toleration, but actually understand each other and open-mindedly and open-heartedly share with one another, so that you have to then later on help young teenage boys and girls out of hypocritical thinking and superstition. Vedanta demystifies everything, Vivekananda said. It breaks down old superstitions. So in this day and age, we're damn lucky to have it, and in the West, because he made sure we did, because he traveled here from India at great risk to himself, that is, as a personality. When he became a success, India loved him, but before he became a success, they were criticizing him for taking teachings like this out of the subcontinent and bringing them to what they called untouchables. It's funny, English were calling them untouchables, but they were thinking all along that the English and the Westerners were the untouchables. They had a word for it, mlecha. Just like in India, in Hawaii here, they have a word for white people who are, came here with this in their mind. You see, greed for worlds and resources and all that. Take the islands away and so forth. It was called howlies. White. They have no color. And as if they didn't breathe, they didn't have any prana. See. So all of this coming off of our discussion at the break, but very much in accord with the gradated levels of a soul. We hate to use the word evolution, but if it can be allowed, there is a kind of spiritual evolution going on here. If you wanted to put it in terms of qualities, you'd say here, it starts gross, primal, vital, ethereal, celestial, cosmic, divine, universal, and superconscious. To look into my mind to find out a good English word or two that would go with each of these levels that in this so-called evolution of the human soul towards higher things would represent each of those levels, where you see how it works in accord with the nature of human beings. The animalistic are at a very gross level. The ignorant also at a very gross level. The worldly at a primal level. Can make basically they're beginning to get more into nature and see themselves as individuals in nature, and that could be an open door for higher things, like to be intelligent, which is going more with the vital. You're beginning to use your mind's thinking process. Not yet pratibha, and probably still stuck in sankalpa. You see why these two teachings go very well with gradated levels of thinking. You can see some very intelligent people that know nothing about spirituality and want to know nothing about religion. And it's not all the fault of the intelligentsia either, when religion has fallen so low as to not be able to explain itself with teachings like we get in the Dharma. It's getting fundamentalist, it's getting narrow, it's getting hypocritical, so forth and so on. But the Dharma is nothing like that whatsoever. It's wide open, it's universal, it's all accepting, it's all inclusive. And what it talks about is all pervasive. Something that doesn't need to move because it's already everywhere. It would be sort of like your pratibha or your atman, we say in Vedanta. It doesn't need to move, it's immovable. Yeah, you could say, well, I'll do you a favor and call you immovable, my soul. But actually, it's the fact of the matter that it's everywhere, so it doesn't need to move. It's all pervasive. Like sweetness in sugarcane juice is how Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about the soul, or the self in all, the Atman, or Paramatman. Well, stopping quickly at the intelligence to mate it up with the vital level of things, if you went to the religious level, you'd be looking more at something ethereal. Why? Because basically they're starting to think about heaven, another world, a world beyond this one. Of course, we know that that's within, according to Jesus, and that hasn't been very well explored or connected yet to the vital. But it has been seen that if you went to a spiritually awakened soul, you'd start thinking about the celestial level of things. Beyond the ethereal, which sort of refers to heaven as a location, you've got the celestial, that refers to beings in heaven, angels, we would call them. Or in our tradition, in Vedanta or Hinduism, you'd call them suras and asuras, gods and demigods, and so forth. You could also say this is also kind of a teaching of the kingdoms of heaven within you, the strata of consciousness that's vibrating at different levels. Just like here, there are things vibrating at different levels, dense or more refined as the case may be. If you went beyond the religious and the spiritually awakened, you'd see the spiritual adept, because the spiritual adept has begun to see what is cosmic. I'm sorry, the spiritual practitioner, not the adept. The spiritual practitioner has begun to see what is cosmic in nature. Cosmic not just in the terms of a physical ether, where, oh, the cosmos up there has many planets revolving about many suns with many moons doing the same thing. Not that kind of cosmic, but the cosmological level of things, where you'll have something beyond angels, celestials, and asuras, something more of a trinity kind of level, something more of a deity kind of level, because in America now, mainly because of Tibetan Buddhism and its advent on the scene, due to some very hellish things that happened to Tibet, one of the good things that came from that, the best things for us, is that Tibetan Buddhism came and it began to show us the more cosmic level of things. Deities, they're called. Deity worship. Upasana and vipassana, those kinds of practices all of a sudden then will become available to souls who are wanting to practice, spiritual practitioners. And they may become spiritually adept, and that mates well with the divine level. Let's see, we took the first quote there, and there's another quote that we will look at after we finish this tract. So, spiritual adept is beginning to see what's divine, not just what's cosmic. You might say that it's beginning to occur to that soul that maybe he or she is divine. That divinity that's out there, it really comes from in here. As this mudra, as we're talking about mudras today, and we'll do the puja tonight to Sri Krishna on Janmashtami. What's there is here, and what's here is also there. So this has come first. Matter and spirit, the Shaitashvatara Upanishad says. One is mutable, the other is immutable. One is material, the other is spiritual. So proclaimed there is the division you might see between God and mammon. And you'll have to do some separating of the wheat and chaff, as we talked about over the last few classes, in order to see this stark separation from the sentient and the insentient. It's all about spiritual life. The practitioner is beginning to find about that. The adept is now seeing it as a divine verity. The master has known it for many times. You might even call a past master. So the master here is divine. That's Daiva. We talked about that in the first half. They're not just animalistic, nor are they heroic, you see, but they're actually divine, and so they're living a divine life, whereas these are still involved in dharma, most likely, because you see Sri Ramakrishna said in that beautiful quote we had up here, that first the jiva is in a state of ignorance, then it attains knowledge and becomes aware that there's some consciousness, some pratibha, some higher sankalpa, if you would even allow it. Lila sankalpa or atmic sankalpa going on even here on this earth with certain awakened souls, and that we have seen masters and past masters come through here. They passed through the earth plane. Thank God for us. See? And they left what we're calling lately footfalls, the footfalls of the Indian rishis. So they've set their foot down in gross soil of earth, actually taken on bodies, see, and shown that there is a higher level or run of soul, quality of consciousness, and level of vibration that one can attain if one, again, has this openness and willingness to sport in the fields of the Lord, and to willingly practice and open to and practice the Dharma and what it teaches. If you went beyond spiritual master and past master, I'm afraid all you'd find would be perfect souls, avatars, and the Trinity. You won't find souls like that in this world very often. They say generally in the Kali Yuga, maybe 500 years passes and you'll see a great soul. It sounds like it makes some sort of sense to me if you start back, say with Buddha, 550 years before Christ, then Christ 550 years later, let's say Shankar, Gaudapada, 600 years, and Shankara, and then Chaitanya, another 600 or 700 years, and finally Sri Ramakrishna now, you can generally see that these beings that are considered great souls, or who have been given the noble appellation of avatar, have come through here. It's just that 500 years is a long time for the reincarnating soul, the jiva, and it's a long time to sleep. I remember Sri Ramakrishna said, if some beings go to sleep for 100 or 200 years, then it's just like when you go to sleep for too long. You'll wake up, you can't see very well, your eyes are bleary, and you're groggy, and what else might happen? You might fall back asleep because of that. But you also could stand up and that morning try and get over it. It's a tamas, it's a cosmic tamas that you've come over you, and it's there in waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Is a thickness, a curtain of nescience. Unless you're into the level of a past master or spiritual master who knows that waking is connected to dream, and those two are connected to deep sleep, and those three are connected to turiya, that is samadhi, or God consciousness, self-awareness, the highest pratibha, the purest gold, the most volatile flint in existence, then you're unlikely to have that kind of awakening, where you, as if yogic insomnia were what these souls actually attained. It's a nice phrase by our founder, Lexikson, you see, yogic insomnia. I have yogic insomnia. Would you give that to me, please? Transmit that to me. Because God has said to never sleep, you see, this third eye always remains open, and the word always remains humming. The Tantras say nobody sounds the word, it sounds itself, spontaneously. So it's a constant thing. It's an eternal verity. So at that level of things, these kinds of beings are open to a knowledge and wisdom that's not just esoteric, it's unknown by the masses. The masses at all these other levels. You only begin to hear about it beyond the intellect in the religion. And it's not very well explained to you in today's religion, so you'd have to awaken spiritually. This is a very important juncture here. Vivekananda came to us and told us it's good to be born in a church, but don't die in a church. If you're born in a church, you know, you can get mixed up with the worldly again, with the intelligentsia, with the ignorant, and even with the animalistic. That's why bad things happen to good people. I've had to explain that to some suffering Christian people that I know of who've had that question. So this is a very important juncture here, and if you can make the jump inward to that, you can open yourself up to these higher levels of consciousness. If you need a friend in high places, you're drawing it from these three. There's even some ways of describing this in song. Jatone hridaye reko adarini samamake. Jatone hridaye reko adarini samamake. Mantui dek arami deki, mantui dek arami deki, arjano ke nahi deke, jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. This Kamalakanta, one of our favorite songsters, you see, the composer of devotional hymns called bhajans, says, "O blissful mind, awaken to the enchanting vision of Mother Shama by opening your inner eye of wisdom." So this awakening process is described. If you can open that inner eye, or he says here, when you perceive her form, say as pratibha, or freedom from lower sankalpa, however you want to put it, then you can see her enshrined within your own heart. See, so that's where the spiritual practitioner begins to feel the divine level of things. And then withdrawn to that sacred chamber of ecstatic love and behold her there in secret. So there are beings who may have such a vision and then plummet right back into their animalistic mindset. How does he explain that? Abiding in that exalted condition, remember that the ordinary mind connected with the five senses cannot enter there. See? So you can have a look at things, because Sri Ramakrishna said, even ordinary people sometimes have a kind of samadhi. I was shocked when I first read that in the gospel. What? He's talking about worldly people all the time, never seeing God, even by accident. All of a sudden he's saying, even ordinary people sometimes can have samadhi. But in their case, he says it's like the case of the blue lotus. It opens up only when the sun's shining on it. If a cloud passes, it can't bear it, and it closes right away. So that means if you do have this rarefied experience because your karmas are right in abeyance at that particular day or moment, and your gunas are in an even cycle at that particular moment, and your desire for the world, for your sankalpa, has been momentarily satiated or dampened, then you'll have this vision, you see. But he says, remember, when you go into that inner place, you can't take your ordinary mind or your five senses with you. But then, he jokes, you're allowed to bring the tongue into that holy sanctuary. So you might spontaneously utter and sing the blessed name of Kali, which he called Shama, later, Mother Shama. That's a word that's both applicable to Krishna and Kali because they're of that dark, dark blue color. She is the divine mother of the universe, he says. So, worshipping in solitude with your self-knowledge intact, your pratibha, let Kamalakanta forever rejoice in the Mother's sacred presence. Yatone hridaye reko Adarini Shama Make. We know that songs like that pleased the avatar, Sri Ramakrishna. It pleased him very much. Let's take this last quote here then, by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He says, there is a greater accumulation of God in man than in other creatures. God is born as man for the purpose of sporting as man. He is thus called Narayan. Rama, Krishna, and Chaitanya are examples of this. By meditating on the divine incarnation of God, one meditates on God itself. If God can manifest through the image in the temple, then why not through mankind? There are people who will worship images, you see, and offer all these things to them. Also, all well and good, but then you forget that the living God is right there doing the offering or watching the offering. So he says, why not then? Why not? When will man be friend to man, as Vivekananda used to say? And being friend is one thing, but worshipping each other as the living divinity is, of course, an entirely different thing. Much higher level. So a quick study, as you say, but if you want to look back on this chart, live streaming audience, and look it up close, or if you want to look into your notes and remember how this gradation happens on at least two different levels, then you can see how there are phases to the soul in relativity, and how the soul can extract itself out of one and place itself in another, until it can abide in a very, very high level all the time, like we saw our gurus doing. like we see authentic gurus doing. So you can see how this has very much to do with reincarnation and rebirth, because as Krishna says in the Gita, it may take several births to reach this higher refinement of soul quality. So that's why you would want to have teachings like, be careful of what you project, see what you wish for, and also bring your intelligence with you, especially to a world like this. And don't mistake yourself for the intellect only, but because that's probably what we would see the secularists and the scientists, and they're doing that. They're mistaking themselves for the container of knowledge rather than knowledge itself. That would be a distinction that would take you away from the intelligent to the religious, and hopefully not just be born in a church, but don't die in a church and become spiritually awakened in that lifetime. A very hard corner to make there, you see. A turn. Let's look next then at the time remaining at incarnation, again from the standpoint of Shankara. So another easy teaching. This last class we're going to go through probably a record number of charts in 3 hours, because we've already been through 4, this is the 5th, and we may get to a 6th. But these are all really easy teachings, but they're very illustrative of shining some light on rebirth and reincarnation. We really need that in the West. As I was saying earlier, without that knowledge that the Tibetan Buddhists have brought to us in recent time, and that India has been teaching from time out of mind, taught it to Tibet actually, then we're really left with no answers to our problems. Death is real, and you only live once. And all the things that are so hard to explain about who you are and how you think and what your qualities are and what your temperaments are just pretty much based on your upbringing alone. But hidden in the soul is the flint of higher awareness and the gold of consciousness. And in some it comes out and in others it doesn't. So there must be hidden things before we were born in us. And our parents should be looking for those as we grow up at a very young age, delivering us these teachings that will clarify things for us, like I was trying to do with that Mexican teenage boy yesterday. Get him out of this fear and doubt about narrow religion and getting him into a wide-thinking Catholic way. Funny, I use the word Catholic, right? But that universal way of thinking. And maybe even not thinking at a certain point. To go beyond vibrations that limit you, because there's some very heavy thinking going on in the intelligent, in the intelligentsia. You see, some very heavy thinking. And it can be very heavy. Weighed down by matter is what I mean by heavy. Not given the light touch. So here we see Shankara's teaching, which acts as another example for us. You can see how it will connect to rebirth, because how many bodies do you have? We know there's 3 in our way of teaching: the gross, the subtle, and the causal, or body, mind, and formlessness, our formless body in deep sleep tonight. But here's another way of putting it in a simpler terms in the Vivekachudamani that Shankara teaches. He says, so long as one does not give up the idea of the self as the body, there is no hope for liberation. Much like Sri Ramakrishna is saying, the world we have can't even realize God by accident, because they're so attached to the body. So he says, do not take this body for the self, just as you do not take your shadow or your reflection as real, nor the body that you see of yourself in dream or in imagination. Well, right there he gives you 5 different bodies that you're playing with. He says, listen, be kind to us for the moment. You're playing with these bodies. So here's the real you see, the Atman, also called the Purusha, the meditator, the witness, the transcendent awareness of all things, the highest pratibha, the a being that's free of sankalpa but can engage in atmic sankalpa. You can put it in so many ways connected to these various Dharma teachings. It's not hard to do, and it's good for you too. So there's the Atman, but it is situated in the anadeha. Deha is a word for body. Deha dhyasa hamkara is one of the no-nos, you see, in Maya, first evolutive Maya. You're thinking yourself to be your body. You're mistaking the body for yourself. Either way you look at it, it ends up to be very bad for you. And keeps you at this lower level, ignorant, worldly, animalistic, maybe even intelligent. Only. Not knowing that intelligence, the Buddha, is free, sporting free. So the anadeha is the physical body. That's what most people think of as themselves. And he said you'll never be able to get liberation if you think of yourself as the physical body. So he's meditating up and beyond it. You see, I noticed here, just today actually, there's a little cobra here around his waist. He doesn't really look like Shiva, but he's probably a Shiva in training because his kundalini is rising. When you see the cobra in our tradition, you think of kundalini rising up the spine like a serpent. It's been coiled up for a long time. Play a little music at it, it'll come up and dance for you, you see. Like the snake charmer in India. Sri Ramakrishna had seen that and had some stories about it specific to spiritual life. So it hears that music of higher pratibha or whatever you want to say, and it begins to uncoil, unfurl itself and come up the spine. So if you even go to a Kundalini yoga teacher even today, he'll say, have you unfurled your coil yet? Have you unwound your coil? It's the first thing he'll ask you. It's like getting a koan from a Zen Roshi when you first meet him. You'll have to think about that for a while. So how awakened are you? How much Kundalini has come up your subtle spine? Because it's not a physical spine we're talking about. The physical spine is just a gross representation of these inner worlds that are in, for lack of a better definition, in a different dimension, you see. We don't want to go science fiction on the whole thing. That's a dead end. But so you want to realize this other kingdom of heaven within you where consciousness is more refined, you see. And beings are existing there in a more refined state. Well, you can see all the vibrations, all the projections, you might say, the sankalpas going on here. Out of the Atman or Purusha, it's fine as long as it knows itself to be that, but if it thinks itself to be the body, all of these things become base, gross sankalpa. For certain. So let's look at some of these bodies it imagines. Chayadeha, the shadow body. In an eclipse, when the shadow of the moon falls upon the earth, the ignorant believe the sun to be swallowed by a dragon. This was actually the belief in olden times. The dragon actually had a name, Rahu, I think. They look up the sky and the dragon was eating the moon one bite at a time. But it got sick and then regurgitated it one bite at a time too, evidently. So basically they were thinking in the superstitious way. Science came along and clarified some of that for us on the physical level. But this shadow body is like that. It's a mere shadow. So you don't think yourself to be a shadow. Sri Ramakrishna had a beautiful teaching for that, though. He said, the later in the day it is, the sun is further away, then your shadow casts a long shadow. But if the sun is straight above you, there's no shadow. So he's talking about ignorance and knowledge, basically. The more realized soul, late in the day, hasn't become aware of its true nature, casts a long shadow. The sun is far away, but if the sun's straight above you, that is, if you're close into that pratibha, or that knowledge, you cast no shadow. You're one with that. So it's a teaching that Sri Ramakrishna played off of from Shankara's teachings. Now the next body over to the right is the reflection body. As the reflection of a moon in a puddle is not real, just so the body is not the self. So this little cartoon here, you could see here, painted for us, is about the story Sri Ramakrishna said about the man who said, I really long to see God. And the Guru said, really? Then come with me. So he took him to the river and pushed his head underwater. See, and wouldn't let him up. And finally he let him up, and the man was gasping and sputtering. And the Guru asked him, how bad did you want a breath of oxygen? So bad, I was desperate for it, the disciple said. The Guru retorted, when you feel like that way for realizing God, when you have that kind of intensity, you'll realize God. So you have to really have a lot more than just a mere sentence, or mere lip service, they call it. Oh, I really want to realize God. Oh, I really want to realize. It becomes like a monotonous mantra. But when you have that kind of intensity, you see. So that cartoon is based on that story of Sri Ramakrishna, but here I'm using it as the man who looked in the water and saw his reflection and touched it. And it's just like a moon in a mud puddle is not real when you touch it. Just so this body is not the self. The next level of dream is the dream body, swapna deha. So we've had anadeha, the physical body, chaya deha, the shadow body, adhyasa deha, the reflection body, and now swapna deha, the dream body. The quote is, one awakened Brahman does not identify with the body, which becomes like a body seen in dreams. That's actually, each of these teachings gets a little bit deeper. They're quite simple to understand at first, but the dream body actually has a very important thing to tell you, more on the level of your deeper realization. So the dream body actually connects from your waking body. You could make a case from going straight from the waking state to the dreaming state, and then to the deep sleep state. That's a classic teaching in Advaita Vedanta. So Vivekananda would say, from dreams awake, from bonds be free. Know the truth, thou art he, thou art she. So that's what the realized soul will come to know. Won't identify with the body. He'll just see it like a dream. Then you have the ahamkara deha, the ego body. All of this is out of the Vivekachudamani teaching by Adi Shankaracharya. He says in there, the limiting adjunct, the ego, is the shadow of the Atman that lives in the heart. It enjoys and suffers, as the case may be. So I said in the first half that the intellect, with its sankalpic abilities, the mind will provide the field, and the intellect will fashion things from it, and the ego is along for the ride. So it enjoys and suffers according to the quality of the intellect and the duality of the mind, or non-duality, as the case may be. Beyond happiness and suffering, there would be bliss, see, non-dual bliss. And there's the jester blowing the horn at a party. You see, that's the ego body, along for the ride, having fun. You see. But Sri Ramakrishna said, or Holy Mother said, the masters and my children did not come to earth to have fun. They know how hard it is to get a human body. I was reading about that in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings a couple days ago, of how difficult it is in that tradition to attain a human body. Because in Buddhism, and I've heard it mentioned even more in Tibetan Buddhism, being reborn as an animal or other types of forms is not that rare. As if you could fall back into the animalistic quite easily if you didn't follow the trajectory, if you prevaricated. See, what's the word? Procrastinated is probably a better word for people to understand today. hanging out in Maya as if I'm all right, you're all right, and everything's all right. Sri Ramakrishna said, nothing's ever all right in Maya. You're fooling yourself. There is a danger. The danger is falling back into another form. What might that form be? Krishna even talks about it in the Gita, taking different forms. And it's not just falling into a tamasic form in sleepy wombs either. It can go a different way. There again, the ego body is a more important teaching, deeper than the dream body. You're getting close to the source of your individual separation from Brahman. The ego did that. It separated itself out. It's a separate eye maker. The ego is a separate eye maker. There is no such thing as a separate eye. There's just one Brahman and you're it, you see. So you broke the law of Advaita when you decided you'd become a separate I. And that was your folly. And that put you at risk. And reincarnation and rebirth and believing in death to be real and not an illusion are some of the results of that, which you see all around you today. You get to the most subtle of all these bodies, it would have to be, again, the knowledge body. There you're talking about intelligence, perhaps, if you've refined it enough. And the quote there is, the intellect takes bodies in different realms. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep belong to it. So you can see how high an estimation Shankara gives to the intellect, to the knowledge body. You might be at the level of wisdom. It's nice to make maybe a distinction between lower knowledge and higher knowledge, but maybe higher knowledge and wisdom. It's where you get this in Dharma, you see. You have Agyana, you have Jnana, you have Vijnana, and you have Brahmagyan, Atmagyan and Brahmagyan. I mean, there are levels to knowledge that probably climb into what we would think of as wisdom. Wisdom has a more profound effect on our mind than the word knowledge. Because somewhere inside of us all we know that there's just secular knowledge out there and it's not satisfying us. And we're using it to make money. And it has all these other uses maybe that are rather mundane. But when you get to wisdom, you're thinking of a sage or a seer or somebody who's said something really powerful to you that woke you up out of your dream, you see, and put you into deep sleep kind of thinking, a more formless thinking. Because wisdom is pretty much formless. Where is it? The only thing I can see in this room that's wisdom are the objects, because the objects are just knowledge made solidified. They're my thought turning into a solid object. And there were a few things in between there that helped that happen, like nature, the 5 elements. But there was also a sankalpic process by which I turned waking, dreaming objects into waking objects. And that was all my doing as I came down and out, you see, and forgot to go back and in. See. So some good teachings of Shankara about that. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep belong to it, your knowledge body. There's only one more quote there that finishes this very simple chart, but applies very well, as you can see, to reincarnation and rebirth. And if you can get rid of these bodies, then why can't you just see through your physical body? Because you're having all these experiences in the physical body, pretty much. But then you must be able to go to a knowledge body that can be in a state of formlessness, deep sleep. I added this in because I just liked the quote, and it referred fairly well to the topic. Sometimes the signs of a luminary are his clothes, sometimes precious clothes, or a deer skin, sometimes the clothes of knowledge. So it's hard to find, to gauge or judge a realized soul by the clothes he's wearing. He might be appearing in a church with priest frock on, might be appearing in the world with just regular clothes, might be in the forest with a deer skin sitting under a tree, or maybe just the clothes of knowledge. He doesn't have a form. It's a voice in my head. See? That's what Vivekananda said at the end of his life. I just want to be a voice without a form. I would like to be a voice without a form. He'd seen, and knew well, of course, at his Nitya Siddha level, knew very well that forms were subject to suffering and change, and birth, growth, old age, disease, decay, and death. All the things that the youth don't think seriously about until it's upon them. You get older, then you get a little bit higher knowledge about it, and a little bit more serious about it, and a little bit more sobered by this journey, and maybe a little bit more desirous of putting this journey behind you and reaching the goal. Must reach the goal of human existence, as my teacher used to say. Here we are rolling on in this beautiful teachings of the Dharma. We could just sit here for hours, right, and do this. But we are coming to close to the end, and I would like to show you the more nuts and bolts kind of teaching then, which is what I would usually use for a subject called rebirth, reincarnation, and the illusion of death. Then it gets into the dynamics of what happens. And we could put side by side, although we might not have time to get to it, this teaching on the bardos. These two were meant to go together. But let's go to Holy Mother's teachings while she was alive in the body, up until 1920 or so. She was there teaching us, and people in India, mostly because she never left India, although people from Europe and America came to her and took the teachings back. She was in India the whole time, and so many of the people would ask her about rebirth and reincarnation. Now, does that happen to you here? Do people come up to you and ask you about rebirth or reincarnation? Or do your children ask you as parents, or do you tell them about it as children? I never heard it breathed once in my family in all the years I lived with them, which was about 19. So it's not something that's commonplace or of the ordinary run of questions. So you could see in India, even in the 1900s, early 1900s, people in India were coming up and asking her about rebirth and reincarnation because it was a part of the philosophy. So therefore, I gathered out of her what we know of her teachings, because there's, speaking about books to go get, because we've mentioned Yoga Vasishta in this class, we've mentioned the Gita, we've mentioned the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and we've mentioned the Vivekachudamani of Shankara. All of these are, we're so fortunate to have many Bibles, you might say, in Vedanta in India. Many, many teachings. The book is never closed on divine wisdom. It has to remain open and even be added unto, and sometimes some taken away from it, as the age progresses and people come to earth with more or less of their pratibha in tow. If they come aware and ready to hear, they're enthusiastic about it. They want to hear and they want to realize. Or if they're just complacent and inadvertent about it. I know the word I'm looking for, apathetic. So I gathered from what Holy Mother said and was taken down by many of her children, many of them swamis, because some of them were sannyasins that went to her, and others were village people, and others in the city of Calcutta when she lived, depending on where she was at any given time. Sometimes in Jairambati at her birthplace, sometimes as the mother of the order, probably the only woman that we can think of who is at the head of one of the greatest orders of the world in present times. She would go to the city and Calcutta and be there overseeing everything. So I gathered together some of the things specific to the topic of rebirth and reincarnation. These will inform us well and probably fill us in. So here's a few quotes from her. After a birth in a human body, some attain salvation in this life, whereas others may take inferior births to reap the results of their karmas. Uh-oh. Inferior births. I wish I had have been there to ask her. Can you explain inferior birth to us real clearly? Is it just like being born in Tamasic wombs, or what about animalistic people and so forth? Anyway, to go on. Not everyone can be free from desire. So she links rebirth with desire. Desire. Should we look back at the Sankalpa chart? You see. Desire for what? Worlds, wealth, mental attainments, intellectual attainments. Not everyone can be free from desire. Why? The creation is going on because all cannot be free from desires. However, that indeed is the last birth in which one gets rid of desires completely. One will not have to come again. And so we know it's not easy for people to rip the desires out of their hearts and minds and emotions without leaving a huge space to fill in. See, it's not given to many people to follow that method like it is. Some of the more powerful beings can do that, you see. So then her teaching was, make sure you fulfill all your desires in the Dharma. Not in the Adharma. Adharma would be like trying to pour gasoline on a fire to put out that desire. It'll just flare up worse. But if you do it dharmically, like what Buddha called legitimate desires, right livelihood, and so forth, that's different. That gives you a chance then to follow a tract like this. This is intrinsically connected with what we're talking about, which probably all of you are understanding perfectly. The other quote on the other side of her wonderful image is, many a time a man takes birth and passes again and again in a certain family due to his karmas. One should not blame God for this. Everyone reaps the effects of their own individual karmas and actions. And though one might have to take on a new body again, one does not necessarily lose spiritual consciousness if one retains one's karmic merits from previous births. Couldn't be much clearer, and I've paraphrased this very saying of hers over the last 3 classes. There's a full rendition of it right there. And it's so powerful to contemplate each sentence of that. It puts it together very nicely in terms of our subject at hand right now. Well, talking about bodies, right? Because Shankara, we looked at these different bodies, and he mentioned deep sleep body and dream body, and he showed us the waking body. So here, basically, is how she puts it. The physical body and primal body. The next category is the subtle body or causal body. And the next is Atman, the true being. That's Atman Purusha, you say. So, first of all, before the quotes, let's see what the physical and primal body consist of. 5 elements: air, earth, fire, water, and ether. The body composed of marrow, blood, fat, flesh, bone, and nails. The 5 organs of action: speaking, handling, locomotion, excreting, and procreating. There's your basic rendition of your physical body, your ana deha, in the last chart. About that, she says, and referring most back to the animalistic kind of level, people with desires take their births again and again. Afterwards they go to other planes and experience pleasure and pain in the course of time, or born again in the human form. We studied that in terms of the Bhagavad Gita recently as the path of the moon, as compared to the path of the sun, or the smoky path, as compared to the path of the sun or fire. So it's a straightforward sentence, statement by her about people with desires who have not fulfilled them and how they take this lower path to the ancestors and back. Would be how Lord Buddha would talk about it. Now there's the subtle body and causal body. See how we have three bodies here, basically, and with some overlapping to these. It's not so cut and dried as it looks. But this immanent world body and then a transcendent world body has to do with your mind or dreaming, and causal body, which is kind of a deep sleep level. Before the quote, let's see what the subtle body consists of. Basically, it's your mind. Intellect, ego, thought, and mind. That's called the antakarana, the fourfold mind. The inner cause of everything here came from that. It also contains the 5 subtle elements. Did you know that the gross elements had to have an origin, come from somewhere? Well, those are audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, and odor. That is, ether is audibility, air is tangibility, fire is visibility, water is flavor, and earth is, or tangibility, and earth is odor. You see? So you connect these 5 with these 5 to find their origins. Evolution, involution of tattvas, of principles that came out of your mind, came out of seeds in deep sleep. This is what we'd love to be teaching to people growing up in schools in the West. This is what we'd love to be teaching them. This is right cosmology, and it has evolution. It isn't restricted just to evolution. It has involution of origins, back to origins there, back to the Word, if you want to go with Jesus' real teachings. So it should be taught in church and in schools. If we were wide open about it, then we'd be looking at this system, at least looking at it. We might want to borrow it so that our biologists would become cosmic biologists, or Vedanta would be there on the scene for us. The subtle body also consists of smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, and hearing. You can see how they were the origin of speaking, hearing, handling, locomotion, excreting, and procreating. I have charts, of course, which side by side draw these towards each other. What is it that's getting reincarnated? See, what is it that's doing the reincarnating is the question in philosophical circles. It's mind and its residue, basically. So you put it really based on sankalpa and desire. And if pratibha was there, it wouldn't be happening, you see. Certainly not in that same way. Should a man be reborn? I certainly hope he will not, Vivekananda said. Not until he can do so in full consciousness. Then the subtle body also has these 5 modes of prana, which we're also unaware of in our ideologies of today. Basically, inhalation, exhalation, circulatory, ascending, digestive, and distributing. That's the 5 pranas. They're part of your subtle body. And then they have a 5-fold manifestation outward too. And they would operate the functions of speaking, handling, locomotion, excreting, and procreating. Would be your pranas, evacuating your waste. Be your pranas, pumping your lungs in and out. So you'd be aware of a life force that's there as the cause of movement, action, and so forth. The quote there, all people excepting some highly advanced souls live in a spirit body for a year after death. The spirit body can be likened to a body made of air. So you go back into your mind. We had a series recently mind is the kingdom of heaven within. And we saw how the kingdoms of heaven are lower heavens and higher heavens. It's not just one heaven, and let's just throw that at the people and let them think about that for 2,000 years till Christ comes back again and hopefully clarifies it for us, you see. No, it's not just one heaven. My Father's house has many mansions. My Father's mansion has many chambers. So that's some esoteric bit of wisdom we need to know, that you'll live about, all people except highly advanced souls will live in a spirit body. It's like a bubble. In fact, it's even described as when you pass, the mind empties its contents into an etheric body. You see? So it's still an individual body that you're holding there. And it's got all the residue from all your thoughts and actions and everything. And that through a kind of silver cord or silver tube creates this, you'd have to imagine it kind of being, or envision it being a kind of body that's a bubble that everything gets poured into. And now it's floating for about a year, you see. And this is your crystallized mind component. And your ego and everything isn't tied up in that. And it's looking for another birth. See, that's where we would go here. After death, what Bardo goes to the next level of your consciousness. How many days, months, years is it going to take for this to happen? If you're a highly advanced soul, it doesn't matter. You were never born in the first place. Your dream is excellent. See? Your future is perfect. See? Everything is connected. And so it's a highly advanced soul you're talking about, or a Nityasiddha and so forth. So I want to take another body? No, I don't. Well, Sri Ramakrishna just came to me in the form of a baby and told me he wanted me to come with him to Earth. So I think I'll take another body. I better get out the old esoteric wisdom and the cosmology and find myself some parents. See? And beam down, Scotty, you see, and to the earth plane. And I think I'll select Calcutta because that's where the old man's going, you see. The old baby and the young baby and the old man were the same thing, you see. Anyway, talking about Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda and their recent incarnations. So, important piece of information, you see. These quotes themselves, although mated with the cosmology, are really the gist of it all. If you just know those, how they're put, how she put them in Bengali and how we can understand them in English, then you'll have a general overall working of how this goes. And you can go to other traditions like Tibetan Buddhism if you want more details. To end here, let's look at our true being. For convenience, I put physical body with primal body. I put subtle body with causal body. And now we're looking at Atman and true being. But the deep sleep state has some things you can talk about. It's undifferentiated. It means there's no difference in it. You don't see distinctions. The only thing you might see would be seeds that would give rise to distinctions. The intellect ceases to vibrate there, whereas here you can see it's the first thing out the gate. Mind exists in a subtle state. So this subtle body exists even in a subtler form in the causal body as a seed. The gunas, here we are again connecting us back to our very first class 3 weeks ago, rest in equilibrium. The condition is called deep sleep by people. It's the closest thing we can introduce to people that would simulate what it's like, your formless body. It pre-exists the physical worlds. That's always got me. That's when it's really got me when I've read it. It says it has anterior to life and mind is the Atman. So you're talking about something that pre-exists the physical worlds. There right away then you're up against going against the grain of science, what it thinks, evolution theory and all of that. Even the 7-day creation theory is going to have to do some special kind of dance in front of you to convince you of its place in things. when you talk about something like that. It doesn't hold water, you see. This is the Adi Daiva Vidya. Adi, original, Daiva, divine, Vidya, knowledge. There it is. And it's here current with souls who are Nityasiddhas and avatars in this present day and time, right here, available to you in your deha, in your anadeha, in your physical body, where your soul and your intelligence are abiding temporarily. Wake up and take stock. Drink this in like nectar. So penultimately, the causal body pre-exists the physical worlds, and it is the cause of the gross and subtle bodies both. There's your cause to everything, in a body, in a form, with a name, in time, in space, that's based in cause and effect. Maya is afoot. See? Develop some very strong pratibha for this. See? Bring it with you next time. Or uncover it quick. Brush off those pebbles while you have the chance, while you have a good teacher, an excellent path, and an excellent ishtam, or ideal, like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. The quote there then, because she's talked about all different kinds of beings here, hasn't she, in a very short amount of words, sparseness and economically, about the causal body, only those who belong to a high spiritual category can be renunciates and gain liberation from all kinds of fetters. I bless you so that you might attain liberation in this life. Birth and death are extremely painful. May you not suffer them anymore. Why, we love Holy Mother in a great sense. She has compassion and everything, but she says it how it is. And where else do you find a great woman teacher? Well, where do you find a great woman teacher at all very often? But where do you find a great mother, divine mother like this, who considered the whole world her children? And 5 million of them now have come to see that she is their real mother. Always remember, you have a mother, no matter what happens to you, she said. I'm the mother of the virtuous, I'm the mother of the sinful. She said all sorts of things like that when she was alive. So who but her can so well pronounce and clarify this business of reincarnation and rebirth after death, after the illusion of death. One more quote and we're ending for the afternoon. Sri Ramakrishna ends it all off in a very fitting fashion. Following the Maya of knowledge, step by step, one attains the knowledge of Brahman. This Maya of knowledge can be likened to the last few steps of a stairway. Next is the roof. Some, after reaching the roof, go up and down the stairs, which is to say that they keep the ego of knowledge for helping others, tasting divine bliss, and sporting with the devotees. A beautiful statement out of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So here we have arrived, even with a few minutes to spare, very few minutes, to the end of our 3-class series on rebirth, reincarnation, and the illusion of death. So here we will end, say goodbye to our live streaming audience, and we will here go into our puja for Janmashtami in the next room with the offering of flowers, incense, and meditation, and our prasad dinner afterwards. We'll keep you all in our hearts as we do so. Om Bhadram Karnebihi Srinuyama Devaha Bhadram Pasyema Akshabirya Jatraha Stirai Rangaish Tushtuvamsas Tanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayaho Swasti Nayendra Vridashravaha Swasti Nahapusha Vishwadevaha Swasti Nastarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual. May we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshiping the Lord and Mother of the universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.